What up, what up? This is Patrick Hayes. In this video, I want to talk about what happens after you die. And the reason why I was inspired to make this video is because I recently made a video that I called I Died and Came Back, where I talked about a near-death experience that I had. I talked about my different hypotheses for what potentially could be going on there. And in this video, I want to go deeper into that conversation because there was a lot of really great responses. There was a lot of really provocative comments that people made that were really cool, and I liked that dialogue. I liked that back and forth. So I wanted to explore the question even more of what happens after we die, because it's something I've been processing for a really long time. I remember when I was a little kid, the first time I learned that I was going to die, my father told me, I remember viscerally that experience of being like, what does that mean? What's going to happen? And the answer was not satisfying. And so ever since that point, I have been asking myself that question and exploring the different potentialities. And at this point, I can't say I know for sure, but I have some running philosophies or running ideas, hypotheses about what could be happening at the time of death, what happens to people when we die. And there are separate different philosophies that are not necessarily connected, but sometimes do overlap, and some of them just straight up contradict each other. But the way I like to kind of play with things that I'm not sure about is I like to let all these things, have their space and entertain them, and then just kind of as I go throughout my life, say maybe give more points to the percentage of whichever one seems to be most accurate. So I want to share some of the different potentialities that I've been exploring, and I'm really interested to hear what you all have to say about potentially what you think it could be and what your response is to some of the ideas that I have. So one thing that came up is somebody mentioned the book Soul's Journey in the comments, and it was a great book. I remember reading that book. There was two of them. I think there was two. I read two of them. There's Soul's Journey, and then there was another one, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, a long time ago. And they made a profound impact on my perception of what happens after we die. In this book, what they say, and this was written by a doctor that, I think it was a doctor that did hypnotherapy, did past life regression, and they were able to follow people in their past lives all the way up to the point of death. And then he found out that he could actually follow them after the point of death to the in-between space between life and their next reincarnation. And he was able to actually identify that there was a very particular process that everybody went through. And so there was hundreds of different people that gave different accounts of what the experience was moving in between lives. And they're all basically explaining the same thing with different words. I don't remember all the details about the book, but one of the things that sticks with me is the idea of soul pods. And so essentially what happened is people would die, they would go travel through, I forget what it was. I remember they were traveling through some like curvature, like at a really high speed through like a curvature space in like kind of like an outer space kind of like environment. And then they would end up in this place where they're with their soul pod. And a soul pod was made of maybe 3 people to like 20 people. And this was generally like a group of different souls that were at the same evolutionary level as you. And you would all play different, you would incarnate together and play different roles to help catalyze and inspire growth when you're in your incarnation process. And so then after you die, you go back to your soul pod and you kind of like review everything that's been going on, look at the different goals that you want to achieve in your own personal development in the next life, and then you take on roles and incarnate into the next life again. And you learn all those lessons and then keep going through the process. So this is the thing that really stuck with me about that, and it resonated because I felt like, well, there's a lot of people that are apparently having this experience, and it seems reasonable, seems logical. It seems like, well, yeah, this planetary sphere seems like it's some sort of like learning matrix for us to learn more about ourselves, and that seems like it would be a reasonable way of doing it. So that's one thing that's kind of been like running in the background as like a potentiality of what's really going on here. But there's a lot of other things too. Some of the other stuff that really resonates with me is thing that I've kind of put together through different esoteric sciences. A lot of the kind of Western esoteric literature has inspired, I don't know, I can't say that it's really any one particular like mystery school, but there's, I've studied quite a few, and there are these running themes that have kind of given me, say, like my own kind of theory or rendition of what's expressed. And it's something along these lines, that we have the potential to be immortal. And what immortal is basically taking the I am Godhead spark that is in all of us and realizing that into a form that exists within a, say, lower dimension than the dimension of the one, the all, the isnness, like the complete Godhead. But if we can get in touch with this I am presence while we're in this life, we can start having this I am presence come into us and reconfigure our astral body into a eternal form. So if we reconfigure it in the same nature of the I am Godhead presence, then the form that we create, so like the geometries that we create in our astral field, become eternal geometries. So in a sense, then we can create like an eternal astral body and we can live on. The I am presence is something that is, it's so absolute and so grand that it's very, it's hard to translate that directly into identity as we understand it now. So when we think about living forever, will we live forever? We're primarily saying like, well, will our ego identity live forever? And the only way to do that would to be purify the ego identity to be an eternal expression of this I am presence by taking that cosmic eternal spark that we are and letting that basically generate our entire astral body so that we have this eternal astral body. And if it's not eternal, then it will eventually die. So in other words, if we build our astral body out of things that are less than the eternal essence of the Godhead, then then that'll eventually corrode over time. And you can say like the most destructive form of building like a false astral body would say becoming like a demon. So you can think of it like this. You can become eternal if you build a unique version of the Godhead that is in alignment with the true nature of creation. But if you're not able to do that, if you're not able to stabilize that, then eventually what will happen is your astral body will corrode. You keep going through etheric and physical bodies as you keep reincarnating, and eventually that seed doesn't take. So it's like that seed was planted into the soil and it didn't take. So if that seed or that expression of God doesn't take, then eventually it gets wiped from the system. So how this correlates to what happens after you die is connected actually in a lot of different ways to a lot of different things. So one thing that many people have probably heard that explains the reason for why ghosts exist is the idea that a ghost is someone that gets caught in the in-between stage after dying and isn't able to make it, say, like out to the higher realms to do whatever process would be the natural process before reincarnation. So you could say like, people call it like going to the light. They weren't able to make it to the light to say be purified and potentially go meet their soul group, right? So like they got stuck on this plane. And so essentially what happens here is that this soul for some reason is bound to these lower realms. And very often what bounds people to lower realms is a certain like addiction or unfinished business in these lower realms. And so say if somebody was, say, like addicted to alcohol, had a really bad alcohol issue and then died from alcoholism, oftentimes these will be wandering souls that are in areas like surrounding bars. These are like spirits in areas surrounding bars that are looking to attach to other humans that are alive that are drinking so that they can continue to live out that addiction and that's what's binding them to this realm. This addiction is binding them to this realm. So the density is holding them. They can't let go of that. They can't let go of something going on with this life that they lived and died from to go and cleanse themselves and move on. They're kind of like stuck in this realm and they're like a hungry ghost. And this is where even the term spirits comes from. You probably know this. Spirits and like alcohol, and then spirits like spirits, because it opens up your body to spirit attachments. And oftentimes it's ex-alcoholics that are attaching to you if you're an alcoholic in the world today. So where I'm going with this is that people that get stuck in this in-between realm become ghosts. Now, I've heard other explanations of what happens to these people or what can happen to these people is that if you can't make it out, like you're stuck in this realm because you're bound to it by some sort of addiction or some sort of unfinished business or trauma that's keeping you stuck, like in this like lower space, that eventually you will be approached by some sort of like demon lord that will teach you, they'll offer to teach you how to become a demon. And to become a demon, which is different than a hungry ghost in the sense that a hungry ghost may not know exactly what they're doing. They're just kind of doing it. But a demon is someone where this demon lord then teaches them how to feed off of people. It says like, okay, you're down here now. And eventually, if you don't get out and cleanse yourself, I don't know if they'll tell them this, but if they don't get out and cleanse themselves and make it kind of to the like reboot stage, then eventually, all they have at this point is their astral body. Eventually, that I am presence is going to leave because it's not taking root. Like it's going to have to go back to the compost heap. And then this astral form that has been created with all these distortions will eventually corrode itself and dissolve into nothingness. That connection to the particular personality or existence from that particular life or series of lives is lost forever. So what will happen is a demon is something that is feeding off of other life force energy in order to kind of like keep that astral like consciousness still alive. So a demon lord will oftentimes come to these astral bodies or these people and be like, okay, this is how you become a demon so that you can continue fueling yourself, because the people obviously have lost the ability to self-generate, which is part of letting that I am presence like embed into you and self-generate, which creates more of like an enlightenment path as opposed to a like demonic path. So this connects in with Dan Winter's work, which was really interesting, about how to create an immortal aura. And he talks a lot about this, charging your aura, doing all sorts of things in your everyday life to create like immortality, right? And immortality, and the Egyptians were really into this too, like the idea of creating like an immortal personality. And this is essentially what I was saying. It's like letting the I am presence embed so deeply into you and then generate your unique expression of the eternal Godhead to stabilize as eternal, because it is made in the likeness of eternity. And so because it's made that way, it then becomes eternal into a, like you say, like an astral body that can live forever. But it does even translate into physical lives when you're talking about high masters. High masters can stabilize bodies and leave bodies in certain areas and then come and incarnate them. You could look into like the different mystical traditions that talk about this, like major masters that are able to, keep a body and then enter the body and then leave the body and go travel different places. So you have that ability to be eternal when you start stabilizing eternity or the Godhead into how you're generating, you could say like your personality. It might not be the best word for it, but as you're generating more accurately the geometries in your astral body. So Dan's work is really cool because he gets into the science of all that. So all these kinds of things tie together. Another really interesting thing that came up that I'm not sure really how it connects was somebody mentioned the term quantum immortality. And I really love that because I was talking about that in my last video where I was talking about how I suspected that there's some sort of phenomenon going on where people can die or appear to die from one perspective, but actually just click through to another parallel timeline from their own first-person perspective. And that there could be a phenomenon going on called quantum immortality, which is a great term for it. Thank you, whoever posted that. Quantum immortality, which explains that in a sense, we're quantumly immortal. We just skip over to parallel timelines, and it may appear to other people that we're dying, but we're not actually dying. And so the people that we see die in our life are dying because that's some way of, say, like the matrix mirror, like evening itself out. But they didn't actually die from their own personal perspective, or at least there's a version of them that skipped through to another dimension and has lived on. And this was really provocative because this seemed like, in a sense, that matched up with some of the experiences that I've had. The one that I talked about in the last video that I made, I'll put a link up to it here, where I had that death experience. This seems very likely like what happened, like I popped through to the other side. So when they brought up that term quantum immortality, and I realized there's actually a lot of people that have been having experiences like this, it's like, that's making me think. But I'm not sure exactly how it fits with those other things. So that's another just cool thing to kind of like riff off a little bit. Now, the other thing that's really interesting is this idea of, well, whatever you believe, you create. because I've heard that also, and that does make sense to me in the same sense of how I understand shifting parallel dimensions and creating your own reality, or shifting to different realities within the physical space. So if we have the capacity to shift to different realities and create different realities based off of what we believe, what we intend, and essentially what our set point vibration is, then why wouldn't that happen in the afterlife also? So is it possible that somebody that is really deeply Christian and influenced by the Christian religion, that when they die, they have a very Christian-like experience, and maybe they go to a heaven kind of place or a purgatory kind of place, or something that is in alignment with those traditions? This makes a lot of sense, because I know that people, it's very common that people that have spiritual experiences will have them in a way where if they are of a particular religious sect, they will have aberrations and visions of particular deities that have to do with that particular religion. So you can say people that are Buddhist that have spiritual experiences see Buddha, people that are Christian that have spiritual experiences see Jesus. So there's something there. It's almost like the Jungian archetype like idea that we're connected into this subconscious of all these different archetypes. But it might be that it's not that everyone has the same exact archetypal experiences, but it's more like your cultural preference or your cultural inheritance has an influence on the kinds of experiences you have. So potentially there might be different, say, astral realm dimensions that have been generated or possibly even created by the collective thought and intention that have gone into that then house people of that particular faith as they, like, after they pass. So there's space for all these things in my interpretation of what could be happening. And I like to kind of leave them all on the table and see in just kind of like through my intuition, through my experience, see what seems reasonable and what continues to make more sense, or sometimes things might make less and less sense. And I kind of do this with all my different beliefs so that I stay liquid in my beliefs and I'm open to learning more, and I'm not too fixed or rigid on things. So these are the different ones that I've played with. And you know, the thing about perfecting your astral field to live on beyond this is really provocative to me, because it gives so much meaning to life too. That's one of the things that I think humanity is missing right now, because since there's not like a solid metaphysics and people are losing religion, not that religion was great in certain ways, but sometimes it is good to know the story of what a human is and what they're here to do, because that gives life purpose. But since people have been losing purpose because there's not like a solid metaphysics, the metaphysics of generating an eternal soul is like really provocative to me, because I think that it really inspires people to be their best person. And it's very rewarding too, because as you generate different stabilizations of, you could say, divine essences within your field, things like unconditional love, things like gratitude, things like honesty, when you do this, it's actually quite rewarding, and there is a truth to it. You can feel the truth in it. And so it would make sense that by doing that, that truth that you're feeling is an indication. And actually, you start feeling like you're tapping into things that are eternal, because you are tapping into eternal things. So it would make sense that by doing that and stabilizing that into your field, that you are becoming eternal. So when we wrap more of the story surrounding that being that you're stabilizing different eternal geometries into your astral field and you're creating an eternal kind of like personality, by aligning your expression with your true nature, which is the connection to the I am presence, which is that little soul spark within you. And that soul spark kind of grows into, you say, like your spiritual, Steiner calls it the spirit man. Like you embed that I am presence into like all of your expression on all levels. And then you become like this eternal expression of the oneness that is expressed as a particular expression to be experienced in realms of limited time space, or at least just like realms that are lower than the realm of the oneness. So I'm super stoked to hear what you all have to say about this, what your thoughts and your ideas are, what if you have any different philosophies that I didn't mention at all. And yeah, I think this is a great conversation to have. I really enjoyed the last one. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you feel like this video would be useful for someone or interesting for someone, please share it with them. I'd really appreciate that. And I'm super stoked to continue bringing awesome content to you. If you want more videos on this topic, put some recommendations for some of the things that you would like me to talk about or cover on this topic, and we can go deeper and deeper. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you next time. One love.